Nelson County, 50th District. I'm going to just briefly say welcome. We have no preconceived notions at all. We are simply here to investigate and look and learn and try to figure out if there's a way at all that we can do something positive for one of our signature industries, while at the same time, I want to make sure everybody hears this, at the same time, doing no harm to our counties and local governments. There's nobody up here that's interested in hurting anybody. We're looking for Pareto optimal moves. And I think we need to start with a little information that Jennifer's going to give us in just a second. I want to, before we go any further, turn it over to my co-chair, President Stivers, if he has anything he wants to add or say.
Thank you, Representative McCoy. Yes, I'm going to call him Chad. We're a little bit informal. Everybody knows who we are here. We had a good discussion about this on the phone earlier in the week, and truly we want to see how we can grow this pie to create more opportunities without any fiscal impact to the negative on anybody. I want to go back to 2014. Everybody said, how are you going to cut taxes and create more opportunity and actually generate more taxes? The reality is we did cut taxes, and because we did it, we created more jobs and opportunity. The old Blackacre saw several $1 billion worth of investment then. Blackacre is then paying higher property taxes, increased jobs in this state, direct. That created more occupational tax. So we want to try to take that theory of good economics, good fiscal policy, to where we don't hurt any local entities. We don't, be it school boards, libraries, county governments, but how do we create a bigger, broader base of industry to where we are competitive and can continue with what I believe is, Damon Thayer gets mad at me when I say this, that truly the bourbon industry is a signature industry. The horse industry is an image industry. They don't have the fiscal impact, but I think Representative McCoy and myself are on the same page about where we want to go. I think we have a good agenda laid out for the next 3 meetings.
And with that, does any of committee members have anybody they want to introduce or say hi to or anything like that before we get started? Go ahead, Representative Decker.
I want to welcome my county judge, Dan Eisen, and the gentleman he's sitting with are the trio of my favorite when I worked for Senator Paul and traveled around. So welcome and thank you all for being here.
I'd also like to welcome my judge executive, Jerry Summers. Glad to have him here.
All right. With that, Jennifer Hayes, please come talk to us. Oh, we need to do a roll call. I've never chaired a meeting at all in my life. So, and I heard President Stiver say he's never co-chaired one. So we've got good staff that's going to keep us on. Go ahead and make a roll call.
Senator Harper Angel, Senator Higdon, Senator McDaniel, Representative Decker,
Present.
Representative Huff,
Here.
Representative Stevenson, Co-Chair Stivers, Co-Chair McCoy.
Here. All right. Now with the roll called, and I think we've got more than half. So, Ms. Hayes, the floor is yours.
Just a bit of introduction for those who may not know me yet. Jennifer Hayes, I'm Committee Staff Administrator for the Appropriations and Revenue Committee, and I'm also staff to this task force. Today we're going to talk about Kentucky taxation, what else, from A&R staff, and we're going to talk about some recent history, some American history, some ancient history as we move through the various taxes and describe each one of those. So here's a little bit of history about the alcohol distribution. Remember back to 1919 and the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that created prohibition. And it wasn't prohibition to drink. It was prohibition to not manufacture, to not transport, or not to sell alcohol products. And there was also a requirement to denature that product thousands of individuals died because they didn't realize that the alcohol that they once were consuming had been required to be changed in a way that chemicals were added, quinine was added, various products were added to the alcohol, and thousands of people died because of that. Fast forward to 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed that 18th Amendment, and Section 2 of the 21st Amendment stated that power to control alcohol resides with the states. And so the power shifted from the U.S. government to the states to control alcohol. States decided on two basic methods of how to control alcohol. Alcohol beverage control states were created in some states. These are where the state controls the sale of the alcohol. You have to physically go to a state-run retail outlet as a consumer to purchase alcohol. 17 states today still do it that way. And then in the other states, the three-tier system was created. And Kentucky was one of those states that began with the normal three tiers. Those tiers are manufacturer, wholesaler, retailer. 3 tiers. And those 3 tiers were established as silos. Manufacturers did nothing but manufacture. Wholesalers did nothing but wholesale. Retailers did nothing but sell that product to the end consumer. But what we have seen since the 30s is the industry starting to evolve. We have today microbreweries, small farm wineries, and we have direct-to-consumer sales where the distinct lines between those 3 tiers are starting to blur. Now, our statute says we still maintain a 3-tier system, but I often get calls to say, well, do you really? And that's a question I can't really answer. Maybe it's going to take a court to decide that. I'm not sure. But the whole point here in this discussion is that the industry over time has evolved. Our tax system has not evolved very much at all. We've made tweaks, but evolution has not really occurred. And so today I'm going to talk about various and sundry taxes all across Kentucky's array of taxes to include 3. The first 3 taxes are all on the wholesale tier of the 3-tier system, the wholesaler, and that's the alcohol excise tax, the wholesale sales tax, and the distilled spirits case sales tax. And then we're going to talk a little bit about sales tax and how there's an interplay there. The property tax, we're going to touch on income tax a little bit, and then the various local taxes. So we're going to be all over the board here.
Hang on 1 second. Go ahead, President Peppers.
Can you, as you go through this, kind of give us a rundown about this is the way Kentucky does it as compared to some other states, or what the kind of trend is?
I will.
Thank you.
So the first one is the alcohol excise tax. Our statute says it's levied upon the use, sale, or distribution by sale or gift. So use, sale, or distribution in the state, the wholesaler becomes taxable. And this is a tax that is based on volume, gallons sold. Excise tax is based on gallons sold. Wholesalers of distilled spirits pay this tax, wholesalers of wine, distributors of malt beverage. See, we started with that wholesale person in our statute, that wholesale tier. But look what we've done over time. We've had to add to wholesalers that where that product might transfer from a wholesaler to a retailer or maybe even to a consumer. We've had to maybe jump over that a tier there. Distributors of malt beverage or retailers of malt beverage who purchase malt beverage directly from a brewer. So if a retailer directly purchases from a brewer, we're skipping over a wholesaler in that that situation. And then we have small farm wineries. And then we have every other person selling, transferring, or passing title of distilled spirits, wine, or malt beverages to distributors, retailers, or consumers. And so I'm going to put on a hat that I used to wear many years ago now, but when I was in the Revenue Cabinet, as it was called then, now the Department of Revenue, as a tax administrator, I can tell you that ensuring compliance on a small group of similar taxpayers is much easier than ensuring compliance on every other person selling or transferring, distributing, whatever. So the charge to the department these days is much greater than the charge of the 1930s to ensure compliance. We've also had to add to our statute that every distributor, retailer, or consumer is jointly and severally liable because of that breakdown between the three tiers. Let's talk about rates now. We're still on the first tax, alcohol excise tax. It's $1.92 on each wine gallon. And I've recently had a question about, well, is wine gallon different from gallons of wine? And you'll see that in the next slide when we talk about the excise tax on wine. And so through that research, here comes your ancient history. Wine gallon is an undefined term in Kentucky Revised Statutes. It's only used in this one place here related to this tax on distilled spirits. And so I think if that question came before the court, they would look to the general meaning of wine gallon over the entire history. And it really dates back to England as far back as the 14th century. And it actually entered Britain's statutes under Queen Anne in 1707. But Britain abandoned that measure of a wine gallon when the imperial units came into play. So the bottom line is wine gallon and gallon in the United States means the same thing because we stayed with the 4 quarts per gallon. And it's not the 3.785 liters that Britain has now shifted to. So a wine gallon and a gallon of wine are the same thing for us. You'll notice here that there's a statement in the statute about retail containers of 1/2 pint shall be 12 cents. And there is that proportional rate that if you sell more or less than a gallon, it's a proportional rate of tax. Well, if you do the math, 8 pints to a gallon, 16 half pints to a gallon, divide $1.92 by 16, that's 12 cents. So you're not really getting a break here. It's just a further statement about the proportional rate. But we do have a reduced rate, 25 cents on each gallon of distilled spirits when the volume of the distilled spirits within the retail container is 6% or less. Now, I'll put back on my Department of Revenue hat. I didn't know of any taxpayer that paid that reduced rate then. I think the industry has recently checked with the Department of Revenue. They don't see that rate being used. So I'm not sure why or how that rate has ever been used. But I did want to point out, and it's something that we might need to talk about later in this task force, is the industry continuing to evolve into ready-to-drink, RTDs. And just note that on June 13th, I saw a Kentucky.com article that Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey launches new ready-to-drink cocktail with Coke. So you're going to be able to buy a can with Jack and Coke in it. And that article said that that drink will be 5% alcohol to beverage volume, which is about 10 proof. and it's going to be available in the market soon. Whether it comes to Kentucky, I don't know, but maybe. So I have asked the Department of Revenue, would this type of alcohol qualify as a distilled spirits for that reduced rate? I have not gotten a response yet. Just recently asked that, though. So that might be something that I'll follow up with the task force if I do get a response, but it's something you might want to consider at a future meeting.
Great. Jennifer, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
The $1.92, I'm going to ignore the word wine. So it's $1.92 a gallon of distilled spirits. Given that the next part talks about 6% or less, any idea whether it has to be 100% distilled spirit to be taxed at that rate? Is this a graduated rate depending upon the alcohol per volume? Or is it just if it has distilled spirits in it greater than 6, it's at that higher rate?
That would be my interpretation, yes. If it has distilled spirits, that higher rate.
Have you seen anything that interprets it one way or another? I hear you to say you're reading it that way.
Right.
I just wonder if there was any authority out there one way or another.
I can look into that, but statutory words. The Department of Revenue doesn't have a lot of guidance in regulation form out there.
Yeah. But this is under something that we've labeled distilled spirits. Is distilled spirits defined?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean, keep going.
Okay.
Do you know, is the federal excise tax on distilled spirits, isn't that a proof gallon? It's the...
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So, but there's no reference anywhere that this would be the same.
No.
That's okay. Thank you.
And let me say no, unless it's contained in that distilled spirits definition. And I'm not. That's a ABC definition over separate from the tax statutes. Yeah. So we could come back with information on that definition. Okay, now we're going to move from distilled spirits to wine. Still the same tax, the excise tax, but on wine now. Just briefly, it's 50 cents on each gallon of wine. There is a proportional rate again, and there is a statement in the statute that the tax shall not be less than 4 cents on the sale or distribution of any retail container of wine. The next is the excise tax on malt beverages. The language is a little bit different here. $2.50 on each barrel of 31 gallons. That equates to 8 cents per gallon. Do the math. 31 into 250, 8 cents per gallon. And there is, once again, a proportional rate. So if you sell anything more than or less than 31 gallons, then that rate is adjusted based upon the product as it's sold. There is a credit allowed to each brewer producing malt beverages in this state of 50% of the tax. They get a reduction of 50% of the tax on the first 300,000 barrels each year. And one other thing to note is there is a malt beverage educational fund. 1% of the total tax collected is deposited into that separate fund from the general fund over to that other fund. The exemptions...
Jennifer, what are they using the educational fund for? Do you know? I think we just changed it this session. I kind of remember it coming up in the budget that...
I can...
Yeah, it actually is administered by the Health Services Cabinet, and it's a pure educational fund. So it's been project graduation type of alcohol education awareness.
Oh, wrong way, sorry. Exemptions from the tax. So if wine is used for sacramental purposes, the tax is not imposed on that. And then any type of licensee where the product that is produced is unfit to drink. So medicinal, pharmaceutical, extracts or service, food products, or scientific, chemical, mechanical, industrial type products. Even though it's alcohol, the tax would not apply. So here is a 10-year history of the alcohol excise tax receipts. And you can see beer there is the blue bar, the orange bar is distilled spirits, and the gray bar is wine. All excise tax receipts, the first of the three taxes that we're going to talk about. We can see that from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 21, beer grew from 6.1 receipts to 6.2, pretty flat. Distilled spirits went from 11.4, thereabouts, to 17.5. And wine went from 2.7 to 3.5, thereabouts. So we see a much larger slope in the line for distilled spirits than we do for the other two. Volume. Now we're going to move to the second tax, which is the wholesale sales tax. And we're going to move from a tax on volume to a tax on value. Yes.
So that disparate, those are shocking. If it's a volume, if it's a gallon, proof gallon, wouldn't there be more?
So Kentucky's tax is just on gallon, not proof gallon. So that would be.
But it's maybe defined. Do you know how it's defined? Is it?
Well, let me get back with you on that distilled spirit.
Thank you.
But each gallon of distilled spirits, whatever that definition is,
but it could be much higher because of the alcohol content, if that's defined part of the definition. No.
Let me look back at Chris.
No.
Okay.
We don't. Kentucky taxes aren't based on proof gallons. Federal taxes are, but Kentucky taxes are just based on by the gallon.
So, and that gallon is not defined as alcohol. Okay. Thank you.
Checking with the attorney expert back here. Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I didn't think so, but just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
President Stivers.
Sure, since I don't have any distilleries, legal ones, in my area. Proof gallons and gallons. So we're talking about 55 gallons basically to a barrel. Doesn't matter if it is 100 proof, 120 proof, it's all taxed the same.
I think so.
On the state.
At the
By the
state level.
state, at the state level.
Yes.
On the excise tax.
Yeah. Okay. This is convoluted as can be.
Wrong way. Okay. So, leaving the first tax, we're now moving to the second tax. This tax, wholesale sales tax, is based upon the value, moving from volume to value now. The statute says that it is a tax for the privilege of making wholesale sales of beer, wine, or distilled spirits in this state. So it's a privilege. For the privilege of making those sales, you must pay this tax. And once again, we started with a very narrow list of who pays the tax, and over time that has gradually gotten bigger and bigger. You can see the 6 types of taxpayers there. And okay, I keep hitting the wrong button. There we go. The taxable base is gross receipts from that wholesale sale. It can be 11% or it can be 10%. It's 11% for distilled spirits, and today it's 10% for beer and wine. And then beginning March 12th, 2021, the same rates apply for direct shippers. So distilled spirits, still 11%, beer and wine, 10%. There is a reimbursement provision, just like there is for the retail sales tax, reimbursement for the collection and remitting of that tax. It is equal to 1% of the tax due. So here's the tax due, I get 1%, I get to keep that as a taxpayer here. But there are exceptions. Microbreweries and distillers are not allowed to be reimbursed for the collection and remittance of the tax. Here is the 10-year history for the three products for this type tax, wholesale sales tax. You can see beer is the blue column this time, distilled spirits the orange, wine is the gray once again. You can see the volume of receipts, the value of those receipts coming in. For beer, it was 54 million back in 2012. It's 63 and 21. Distilled spirits started at 29.7 back in 2012, and today they've almost caught up with beer at 62.7. So you see the two bars almost equal. And then wine, 14 million versus right at 20 million for that product. That's the second tax.
And Jennifer, my understanding is we are one of two states that does this tax.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that just as soon as we
Okay,
get
all right.
past one more tax, and then we're going to talk about
Go-
other states.
Go ahead,
Do
Representative
you
Decker.
have any information to show how many taxpayers are in each category?
I would have to go to the Department
Could
of
you-
Revenue to get that.
Could you get that for
Yeah.
us? Thank you.
So here is, click the button. Here is the third tax on the wholesale level tier, and it is what we call the distilled spirits case sales. It's a very simple tax, 5 cents on each case sold in the state. One slide here just to show you the receipts. It's a very small tax. It began in, in 2012, receipts were right at $117,000. 2021, we're at $202,000.
So two quick questions. One, how is a case defined? 6 bottles, 12 bottles, 24 bottles,
I don't know that it's defined in.
9 liters.
Okay.
Okay. And this is also then a volume tax, not at all a value tax.
Correct. Cases, number of cases, the volume of cases sold.
Yeah. So 12 750s?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And does it matter if it's not sold by a case? Or do they do the math? So if I sell 1,000 bottles, but only as individual bottles and never sold a case, do we divide it by that? And do you know?
I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Do you know the answer?
It all leaves the distillery in a case.
But this is taxed at the wholesale level.
Right.
It might not all leave the wholesaler in a case.
I don't know.
It could, but it might not have to. Yeah.
Because as I've been to some distributors, they will get an order and they'll put together a box that may have 6 Knob Creeks and 5 Tanquerays and whatever their retailer has. They won't sell by. Sorry, I'll say Woodford, whoever. I don't want to offend anybody, but they won't do case by case. They'll break it down in a lot of situations, don't they? For smaller retail operations.
But I believe that tax is paid when they receive the product from distiller in case form
Okay.
before it's broken up and then sent out.
It might be useful to know when.
And I can confirm that with the Department of Revenue if you'd like for me to.
Yeah, and Jennifer, maybe one of the things we'll ask you to follow up on for the next meeting is the timing on some of these taxes.
Sure.
When is it the snapshot taken? And just thinking out loud here, you guys may know, what about the barrel sales, where it's a barrel select program? Is this still? I guess it's still when it leaves the distributor or the manufacturer going to through the system.
Your system.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so let's leave the PowerPoint slide in your folder. You should have a document that is 3 pages stapled together. The top page should say state tax rates on distilled spirits. This information in this 3-page document is from the Federation of Tax Administrators website. They collect each year, so you can see as of January 1, 2022, these are the rates by states. So when you asked about each state, let's look at that first column. So you have the column of states, and then the next column says excise tax rates. So you will see a number there for each state, or you will see a footnote. The footnote is the 17 states. It's related to those 17 states. So there is not a tax rate in those states. They control the sale. So they control the price of that. But for the other states, these are the states within the three-tier system. And one note I will show you down on Washington State at the very bottom, you'll see footnote 3. So they, in 2012, privatized the sale. So they have gone from a state-controlled to private control of alcohol sales in Washington. And you can see their rate, $14.27. That's the highest rate of all the states. Number 2 is Alaska, $12.80. Number 3 is Illinois at $8.55, and then they trail off from those top 3. So remember, distilled spirits, Kentucky, $1.92. So this is that first tax that we talked about, the excise tax. Now look at the column that says other taxes. And I'm going to point several different places here throughout. Let's talk about the wholesale sales tax, our second tax that we just discussed. And Representative McCoy, you're correct. Kentucky at 11%, you'll see there in the note, 11% wholesale tax related to Kentucky. The only other state is South Dakota. You see 2% wholesale tax. 2 states that have that tax. Let's talk about our third tax, case sales, the one we just discussed. Let's look at South Carolina, $5.36 per case. Arkansas, 20 cents per case. And then Kentucky, 5 cents per case. So 2 states have the alcohol sales tax. 3 states have the case sales tax. Yes, sir.
Jennifer, do you know if any of these other states on their excise tax rate, it's the same question that Representative Decker was sort of alluding to and President Stivers, are any of them proof gallon versus just volume gallon?
So I don't know that it's proof per se, but it's you'll see many states say under certain percent.
I see that in the comments there.
Yeah, and so I think when the percentage of alcohol by volume reaches that level, then there is a lower rate that is assessed.
Okay. And tax guys in the audience, what's the federal excise tax rate?
$13.50 per proof gallon.
Per proof gallon, and what is a proof gallon?
Depends on the proof of the alcohol that is sold. So if it's 100 proof, you pay the entire $13.
Okay, so we're going to do it based on the APV. Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. President Stivers.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Excise tax, general sales tax, the 3 taxes you've talked about. These are taxes we assess at the central office in Frankfort and only come back to the central office in Frankfort.
That's correct.
These are not divided among any of our gentlemen to the right, be or left. So this is purely a general fund receipts.
Yes, except for the 1% that for malt beverages that goes to the malt beverage.
Oh yeah, okay,
fund.
got it.
Other than that, yes, these are all general fund receipts.
General fund receipts. And that goes back to your 10-year history of what it's generating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Senator Higdon.
Just a quick history lesson on the wholesale sales tax, those that haven't been around for a while. Back in the 80s, we took the sales tax from retail and moved it to wholesale, so we could collect it.
That's the next slide. You're stealing my thunder here.
Well, I'm
Senator
sorry,
Higbee.
but anyway, it's something that and then in 2008, not only did we left the wholesale tax, but we added sales tax back to retail, because a lot of people thought we didn't have sales tax on, and we raised the cigarette tax that year, and everybody would call us, if you're going to raise the tax on cigarettes, you better raise it on alcohol.
So let's talk about this slide that Senator Higdon is discussing right now. So three time periods that we need to look at. So prior to June 1st, 1982, there was no wholesale sales tax, just as Senator Higdon said. June 1, 1982, the wholesale sales tax comes into play. You'll see that in the white box there. So prior to 1982, we only had two taxes, the excise tax and the case, distilled spirits case tax. On packaged alcohol, there was the retail sales tax. Alcohol sold by the drink, retail sales tax. Then when you move down to that white block in the middle, June 1, 1982 to March 31st, 2009, you see the wholesale sales tax is implemented, created and implemented, and Senator Higdon is right. The sales tax on packaged alcohol is removed. There is an exemption created. The alcohol sold by the drink remained, the sales tax remained on that, even during that time. Then we moved to April 1, 2009, and you can see what changed was the sales tax was once again imposed upon packaged alcohol. So that's the interplay that has occurred over time between the wholesale level, the retail level of the excise taxes, wholesale sales taxes versus the retail sales tax. So let's move to sales tax now with that little bit of history. In 2021, remember House Bill 249, the definition for machinery for new and expanded industry was expanded to include machinery directly used in manufacturing of distilled spirits, wine, or malt beverages at a plant facility, that's a defined term for sales tax purposes, that includes a retail establishment. So think back to our three tiers that we were discussing. Here we have a manufacturer that has a retail establishment. So new and expanded industry, that equipment, there is an exemption today for that equipment. Prior to House Bill 249 and related to there industries who might have a manufacturing and a retail establishment at the same location, there is no mixture. But for distilled spirits, there is that crossover between the two lines of manufacturing and retail. While we are on sales tax, I want to talk just briefly about the Wayfair decision. That is specifically a U.S. Supreme Court case that applies only to sales tax. And if you'll remember the history of internet sales for sales tax purposes, we have some really old cases of National Bellis Hess and Quill at the U.S. Supreme Court level, both saying that the states did not have the jurisdiction to tax, for sales tax purposes, those internet sales coming into the border when that retailer did not have a physical presence within the state. Wayfair came along and reversed those two decisions, and I'm sure you are thankful that they did, because the internet sales and sales tax is really what helped us through this pandemic period, as individuals were no longer allowed to go into stores and purchase, many turned to internet sales for the purchase of goods, everyday goods that they were buying. And that is one of the reasons that we came through the pandemic with such good receipts. All across the states, they're seeing that. But just a reminder about what the Supreme Court said in Wayfair. They blessed the streamlined sales tax approach. And that approach sets thresholds for sales at $100,000. So you have to have more than $100,000 in sales in a state for them to submit their jurisdiction, or 200 transactions in the state. Streamlined sales tax also says there's one rate per jurisdiction. So there was one state rate, one local rate per local jurisdiction if a state has local sales tax. Additionally, those local taxes are required to be centrally collected and distributed to those local jurisdictions. And then finally, the biggest thing was there are similar definitions of products and terms throughout all the streamlined states that have adopted that agreement. So, if it were to apply to distilled spirits in Kentucky would be the same as distilled spirits in whatever other state. And the Supreme Court has said that relieves the burden on interstate commerce by all the states coming together and creating this simplified way to impose sales tax when that retailer does not have physical presence in the state. So the burden has been lifted. And so just keep that in mind as we continue to talk about expansion of taxation outside the borders of Kentucky. Now, let's move to the property tax on distilled spirits in bonded warehouses. This is the tax, I think, that this task force is named after, bourbon barrels. We're talking about the bourbon that is in those barrels and the property tax that is imposed upon that bourbon. But just like sales tax, I feel compelled to give you a little lesson on property tax in Kentucky. Very high-level lesson here. Property tax in Kentucky is in the Constitution. Section 171 of Kentucky's Constitution says taxes on property shall be uniform upon all property of the same class subject to taxation. So you see there, property, and there are classes of property. And Section 171 continues by stating the General Assembly shall have the power to divide property into classes and to determine what class or classes of property shall be subject to local taxation. So at a very high level, there are two primary classes of property at a very high level. There's real property, which is land and buildings on that land. And then there's personal property. And if you look around this room, desks, chairs, computers, microphones, all of that is personal property. The bourbon inside that barrel is personal property. Now, one more section of the Constitution, Section 170, says the General Assembly may provide by law an exemption for all or any portion of the property tax on any class of personal property. So you have the ability to say yes or no to local taxation, or yes or no related to state and local on any class of property. Constitutionally, you have that authority. Now, what is a bonded warehouse? That's the next question that keeps coming up. It's a federal provision, not a state provision. And it dates back to the tax that was imposed at the federal level back at the Civil War to pay for that war. The tax originally was as the product came out of the still, the tax the federal tax was imposed. But there's problems with that. Think about what happens when that product goes into a barrel. The wood of the barrel immediately absorbs that product. So you might start with, 55 gallons, like you said, in a barrel. Immediately, though, it's absorbed, and so you might lose 3 gallons just immediately. And then think about over time. That product evaporates. It's liquid. It evaporates. So, 55 down to 52 to over how many ever years, a much less volume in that barrel when the product is ready to be sold. And so the federal solution was to establish these places, bonded warehouses, so there's a registration process, and then what they call a gauger was assigned as a person who actually went and took measurements at the bonded warehouses. And we see over time that the federal tax was shifted from right out of the still to aged 1 year, and then later it was taxed at age 3, and then later at age 8, and then finally shifted to at 20 years. So that aging process is no longer in play for federal tax. And I have not found any other state that imposes a tax on aging spirits. But considering Kentucky's Constitution, the language there about all property being taxed at a fair cash value, and how we have slightly evolved over time, only making tweaks, it's easy to understand how we got to where we are today. So every proprietor, owner, custodian of a bonded warehouse is required to fill out a form stating how much product they have and what the age of that product is, and to give that to the Department of Revenue. Its value is assessed by the department. It's what we call centrally assessed. The PVA does not come into play in this property tax. And then the Department of Revenue values that and then returns that certified value back to the county clerk for local taxation. The tangible personal property, so personal property, the normal state rate is 45 cents per $100 of value. Distilled spirits has what we call a reduced rate, 5 cents. So lower than a desk or a chair or, whatever. 5 cents per $100. And generally, all inventory is, for whatever business, it receives that 5 cent reduced rate. So while it's a reduced rate, it's generally a rate for all types of businesses that have inventory. And then the tax becomes due September 15th following that assessment date on January 1st. These are assessed values that, and I thank the Kentucky Distillers Association for this information. They have an annual open records request to the Department of Revenue where they are receiving the assessed values of distilled spirits. And so this is the history that was provided by KDA. So you can see 2012, it's $1.7 billion of assessed value. And 2021, it's $4.4 billion. So you can see increasing over time. Assessed value, not tax receipts. So don't get this slide confused with the other. This is assessed value.
President Stivers has a question.
Assessed value can be on volume or price?
Neither. It's what's in that bonded warehouse, the product that is in that bonded warehouse as property. What is the value of that property, that distilled spirit?
Okay. Well, I'm not following you at all. So there's like 4 million barrels in 2012. I wanted to say that because I think that's about what it was. You didn't tax it by 4 million. The assessed value wasn't based on 4 million barrels at 50 gallons per barrel. You delineate to say this is a 3-year-old versus a 10-year-old versus a 15-year-old.
Yes.
So you basically have to monitor that.
Well, and it's
And value it.
self-monitoring by the industry. So the industry reports to the Department of Revenue the volume of the spirit by age category.
So actually, you could maybe not have any more barrels, just more valuable aged liquid.
So it's a complicated formula, but Jennifer is exactly right. So we, by February 1st of every year, provide a breakdown, and it's all based on 53-gallon equivalent barrels. So if you're aging in a smaller barrel, you have to convert it up to 53-gallon barrel. Not every barrel is the same. So some barrels have been there 1 year, 2 years, and then 8 years and above. So the Department of Revenue has a formula by which they calculate how much that barrel, how long it's aged, how much it's evaporated, and as that barrel ages, it becomes worth more in value. And so when you turn in this sheet with all the breakdowns of how many barrels you have by years, they use this value per barrel sheet to determine what the value of each one of those barrels is. And then they also, what to your question though, they also have what's called, it's a part 2, it's a schedule, it's neutral spirits. So if you have spirits in a tank, let's say a vodka or something like that that doesn't age in a barrel, you convert those to 53-gallon equivalents as well, and those are considered another price value.
Before President Stivers follow up, will you introduce yourself? For
I'm
the record?
sorry. Yes, I'm Eric Gregory. I'm president of the Kentucky Distillers Association.
Thank you, President Stivers.
So it could be a volume issue that you're seeing the increased assessed value, or it could be a pricing or a combination
Yes, sir.
of the two, that you have both more valuable and more barrels. You just have to look at it from a year-to-year basis to see what's driving the assessment.
You're absolutely correct.
Volume or value.
It's both right now. You're absolutely correct. So right now we have about 11 million barrels aging as of January 1st, 2021. The last year's statistics won't be available until August or September, according to DOR, based on the open records request that we filed. So yes, we have quadrupled or tripled on the number of barrels in the last 10 years. And also, as you saw through the wholesale tax, which is a value tax, what's driving a lot of the bourbon industry these days is the premiumization of alcohol. So your extra aged spirits, your 6, 8, 10, 12, 15-year-old spirits are what's driving consumer demand right now. So the longer that ages, the more valuable those get. So you don't have as many people dumping barrels early as you used to.
Okay.
And I apologize, my answer should have been both instead of neither.
I want to see if I understand something that I don't think you've talked about, but do you know, I understand that all barrels are the same valuation, not by age, but just I'm talking about one distillery versus another, right? Is that right? So
Yeah, they don't distinguish between
distinguish.
distilleries.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what the valuation, this assessed value is in comparison? Do you know the true value, the market value of all of the barrels?
That would be by brand.
Right. Do you have that kind of
No,
information?
ma'am. I'm not sure there's any way we could calculate that, quite frankly, because each brand is different. Each brand is aged differently.
But we know it for assessed value.
We know for assessed value, yes, ma'am, $4.4 billion.
But we don't. You don't have any.
We don't have it from ourselves, and it's we were talking about this earlier with Judge Eisen. Right now, a bottle of Blanton's in Kentucky can go for $99. In New York City, it's selling for $400.
Right.
Right. So it's supply and demand.
This seems apparently low compared to the fact that, or maybe not, but that some of them
$4.4
are
billion
old.
is a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Yes,
a lot
ma'am.
of money, but if you sold it in New York, it'd be, what's the fair market value is the only thing I'm getting at.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, so keep in mind we're still talking about the property tax here, but we're going to shift to an income tax provision related to that property tax. So there is a distilled spirits tax credit for income tax purposes that is equal to the distilled spirits property tax, both state and local taxes paid, that 100% today, 100% of that tax paid can be taken as a credit on your income tax return. There are some strings attached to taking this credit. The manufacturer would have to show the Department of Revenue that these 4 bullet points here in the middle: construction of facilities, remodeling of facilities, the purchase of barrels or pallets or equipment, access road or parking facilities, or construction to market or promote tourism, that those things had been completed prior to the use of that tax credit for income tax purposes. Now, the credit is non-refundable. That means that if you have no tax liability in that year, then you really don't have a benefit from the income tax credit. And when you think about how income tax works, it's a little confusing sitting here as an accountant trying to understand the interplay here between the property tax paid and that construction or those purchases that have to be made, because you have all your income, then you have your business expenses. These construction and purchases of items are business expenses which reduce your income, but then you get a credit on that reduced income. So there is reason why that credit is not routinely used, just based upon the income tax and how it works.
Is there a carry forward provision?
You are allowed to accumulate that credit. So yes, over years. So you can accumulate it, but then once it is taken, no, there's no carry forward past that.
Once it's taken,
Yes.
but you can use it up over time.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that is the income tax portion related to distilled spirits. And then let's move on to local property taxes. And I'll point you to the one-pager in your folder. And I apologize up front for the very small print. But I was trying to get it on one page. And once again, this is information that is provided by the Kentucky Distillers Association. And I just wanted to walk through the columns here to make sure you understand. The first column, of course, is the county. So these counties impose a local property tax on that distilled spirit in that bonded warehouse that we're talking about. The next 3 columns are related to school districts. So if you were to, that second column, if you were to repeal the distilled spirits tax, school districts would be impacted a total of $18.5 million through the loss of the property tax on that. The second column shows you that school districts would be able to recoup some of that money through the SEEK formula. And KDA has gone through the SEEK calculation and made those calculations. So let's just look at Anderson County, my home county, right up there, top line. We in Anderson County would lose $1.1 million, but for schools. But then through the SEEK formula, $961,000 of that would be replaced through the SEEK formula. But we would still lose $162,319 to schools. And as you look down through the column, that net gain or loss, almost all counties would lose money. Or let's say schools. Almost all school districts would lose money if the property tax on distilled spirits, local property tax, was repealed. Then the other columns, okay.
Go ahead, President Stivers.
Do the people out in the audience have a copy of this? Because I think if not, they
It
need
is available on this task force website as meeting materials for this
to
meeting.
make sure they're looking at these numbers next time. Okay.
So now let's look at the next column. Cities may impose a tax on this distilled spirits. You can see the total $1.2 million would be lost. There's no way to recoup that through any other formula. County fiscal courts would lose 3.5 or so million. We have one ambulance district, special taxing districts now as we move across the chart here. Extension service, health districts, library districts, mental health districts, transit authority, planning commissions, fire districts, air boards, urban services. You have a net column there where some totals are netted. And then you have your county-wide net loss. And every county on the sheet would lose if the local tax were repealed on distilled spirits. Like I said, this is Kentucky Distillers Association calculations.
And if I understand these numbers, some of it's based on like last year's.
Yes.
Can you walk us through where all that comes from? Because I think some's future, some's past.
Yes. And it all revolves around the property tax calendar, and that's what this slide, I think, points to, that these are estimates, and they can only be estimates at any point in time other than the actual calculation at the city or county level or the seat calculation, because they use 1 year of tax data, assessed values, and another year of rates, but in each situation, that each item that is applied, it's using the most current data for that item at that point in time. And you think about the property tax calendar. Let's talk about that a little bit. The assessment begins January 1st. The value is established as of January 1st each year. There is a time where taxpayers can protest and question that assessed value. So a very short window of time, but a window of time. Then there is the process where those values are certified by the Department of Revenue and sent back to counties, And then there is the rate setting process that occurs based upon that certified value. And so when you look at the entire calendar, it takes from January 1 until November, when real property tax bills are sent out, September 15th, when this type of property tax bill is sent out. It takes the entire year practically for the entire process to culminate in the value for that year and the tax due for that year. And so at any point other than at that specific point in time, it can be nothing but an estimate.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Decker.
So, do you have a total of the entire amount that came up for whatever year this was from the tax to the state, the entire total amount?
So this sheet is only county local tax.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, did everything come back down? Is my question. Is the amount you receive equal to what comes to the counties, or is it used for any other purpose than these things? So this amount that is on here is the total that you received, and then it all went back to the counties.
Once again, no. So it doesn't come to the state, if that's what you're asking. These are property tax is assessed at the local level.
Right. So they just report it.
So when the bill goes out from the county clerk to the taxpayer, it comes back to the local jurisdiction. It doesn't come to.
And then they do this distribution themselves to the school, the EMS.
Yes.
So they do that.
Yes.
So it doesn't come up to the state and back down.
Right.
Okay. But is the So then that probably answers the question. It's not, I think that answers it. It all stays in the county. Except that the SEEK formula is greater for, so does some of it leave to go to another county for SEEK funding? Is that?
So the SEEK formula calculation is separate from the property tax. So SEEK looks at the local contribution.
Yes. Yes.
And so that local contribution is
this.
Is this.
100% of what the attribute. So
this plus the other local taxes that are imposed on property tax.
But I guess my question was, do we collect this distilled spirits and part of it go to another county for their SEEK formula? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
You do have the state tax on barrel tax that goes directly, that nickel per $100 assessed value, that goes directly to the state.
Okay.
So there is a state tax, and then there are local
Gotcha.
taxes.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
I'm going to look at the judges if I can, Mr. Chair. I'm going to assume, as I understand this, there would be a tax bill sent out to, take your choice, I'm going to use Jerry's, to Clearmont, to Beam Suntory, what's there.
Sure.
And however many barrels, the sheriff would send that to them, and then $1 million is paid back. I'm just assuming, for example, that's their tax bill on all the barrels sitting there as a local property tax. Then the sheriff gets that check back. Of that $1 million in this example, 52%, then he cuts a check to the local school board, and then the others break down to these respective taxing entities to be equaling $1 million of tax receipts on the tax on the bourbon barrels.
Yes, sir, you're 100% correct, Senator. It's no different than
Your regular property tax.
Except for there's no part back to the state.
Right. On land, there is actually realty. There is a component of that comes back to the central office.
Yes.
That's a difference in this style of tax.
Absolutely, because we'll be happy to present that. We've got it broken down into each distillery for a history of years. And to show you where the property taxes is at versus what I must say, the ad valorem, or what we call the spirits tax in our community as well.
Senator Higdon.
I was just going to help Representative Decker on and some other people. The SEEK formula is as clear as mud. It's one of those things that you won't find too many people in government or in Frankfurt that really fully understand it, and I don't. But I can give you a layman's. $4,100, I think, is the SEEK. That's per pupil every year. So a county like Marion County that gets quite a bit of ad valorem tax, Marion County only might get $3,500 in SEEK money because there's an offset for those counties who have increased property tax. A county like Casey County that doesn't have that property value might get $4,400 because the SEEK formula tries to balance out that revenue in counties. So, but again, it's clear as mud.
Okay.
Can I go back to another?
Yeah, President Stivers, go ahead.
So, Ms. Hayes, let's take the SEEK allotment out of it. The net proceeds received from all the governmental entities would be somewhere around $25 million? Am I adding that right?
Okay, so I don't trust my adding in my head anymore. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm basically taking, if you're thinking about total receipts, not impact of what you would recoup from the SEEK allotment,
Okay.
because
So schools would lose 18
million.
18.5. Cities would lose 1.2. Counties, fiscal courts 3.4, and keep going across there, whatever that adds up to. So I think you could add
28 million, about 28, 29
countywide
million.
15.5 plus 13.8.
Yeah, 28, 29 million is total receipts from the ad valorem tax as of this last, or this whatever this snapshot,
This
year
snapshot,
was.
yes.
Go ahead, Senator Higdon.
I had an email from Jeffrey Hayes that for 2021 the distillers distillers were slated to pay more than $33 million in ad valorem tax for 2021. So 31, 32, 33 million, give or take a few cents.
I want to jump back to something else too.
Yeah, President Stivers.
I'm going to jump back to your initial handout. So the ad valorem tax pays in this snapshot around, let's just say round up to 30 million. And again, I'm just understanding this. In 2021, distilled spirits paid $17.5 million in excise tax. That's page 10 of your chart.
2021, 17.5, yes. Excise tax.
And then on page 13, they paid distilled spirits, paid $62 million in wholesale tax receipts.
Yes.
And then based on a 9-liter, or basically 12 750 milliliters, distilled spirit case sales receipts in 2021, 202,000. So approximately $80 million in taxes that were not local taxes that did come directly back here.
Correct.
So you're talking about 80 and 30. So total tax liability, either local or to the state, was around $110 million.
Yes, sir.
In this snapshot. Okay.
Well, and the receipts that you're talking about for fiscal year 21, those are actual receipts. So that's not a snapshot. That's actual in the bank, in the general fund.
Okay.
And
Thanks, Jay.
that 30 million is state and local.
The barrel tax.
No, the ad valorem,
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
that was about 30 million here. I was just rounding up. The
Okay.
110 is a combination of the two.
Okay.
I think I'm adding that right.
I think I followed you. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move past the local property tax to the alcohol license fee that is assessed at the local level. 243,070, KRS 243,060 first, I'm sorry. Allows a county or a consolidated local government in which alcohol is trafficked to impose a license fee. This is a maximum annual amount for the license in that year. And a county shall not impose upon any person who holds a city license. So there's that. If you're in both city and county, then you just do the city tax. 243,070 is the same thing for cities. Cities are a consolidated local government. That the rates are a little bit different and the licenses are a little bit different, but it's based upon that activity of business done in that jurisdiction. And then there is, moving from the license fee, there is a regulatory license fee that is allowed at the local level. 243.075, subsection 1, talks about cities with a 20,000 or less population, county that without a city that has population over 20,000, so still within that 20,000 or less population, or if you were grandfathered in prior to January 1, 2019. This is a regulatory license fee that can be imposed at a maximum rate of 5% on the gross receipts of the sale of alcoholic beverages at each licensed establishment. And there are strings associated with this tax. The local jurisdiction must use these funds separate from their general fund, specifically related to the policing or regulatory or administrative expenses associated with the sale of alcohol within that jurisdiction. Then subsection 2 of that same KRS says, if a city or a county that is moist, you also may assess this type of regulatory license fee. But once again, that must be used for policing or regulatory issues within your jurisdiction. That is all that I have. And I know we've had questions throughout, but I'll be glad to take any additional questions and do additional research.
Representative Decker.
Do you know, and I don't know if you have this type of information, but is there any other industry that has that many fees and licenses regulations in a county? One of my distillers told me she had 5 different fees and licenses.
It's harder for me at a county level because
I understand.
It's going to be jurisdiction to jurisdiction, right. I would say this is the more regulated industry within the state.
And maybe for reasons other than it's just different. I understand that, but I have been told that all of these taxes together would equal about 60 to 65% of the cost of a bottle. Is that, do you know? You probably don't know that, but I
that
see
would be an
people
industry
shaking their
question.
head. Yeah, I see them shaking their head. Thank you. You've been very informative, helped me a lot. Thank you.
Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to, I guess, a little history lesson since Senator Stivers and I were here in 2014, and this was a bill that Senator Stivers worked very hard on in the industry, and basically what we did, at that time we thought we had eliminated the ad valorem tax, and we made a commitment to the bourbon industry to do so. At the same time, we made a commitment to local governments and school districts that they would continue to get their money by the way we set it up. We set it up as a tax credit where the distilleries paid their money, paid their taxes, and they were going to receive it, get it back in a tax credit. That worked out very well when you had 4 million barrels of bourbon in the state. Now with 11 million barrels of bourbon in the state, it's not working out very well. So we need to figure out a way to keep both commitments, commitment to the industry and a commitment to the community. So
there is a very simple change that could be made to the income tax credit, and that is make it refundable so that it goes back to the industry in the year that they pay it. So remove the strings of you have to, do construction, or you have to purchase barrels, or you have to do these things, and just make it a refundable income tax credit. That will cost money, of course, but that is a very simple solution to keep cities, counties, locals, hold them harmless. one thing to think about is it would require the industry to pay the tax and then get it back from the state. But that is one solution that you could consider.
Thank you, President Stivers.
On your page 26, local taxes, regulatory license fee, you're going to have cities and counties, and I think virtually every county I represent, no county is wet, but every city is wet. So is that moist, or is that just by the drink?
Okay, I hear moist back here. Moist.
Moist what? Moist by the drink? Or if the city's wet and the county's not? What's moist?
Sorry, Eric Gregory again. If the county, I'll look at my judge here. If the county has something in its boundaries that allows alcohol, it is considered moist. So if it has a golf course, that's a moist precinct in that county. If it has a city with by the drink sales at restaurants and bars, that's considered a moist area within that county.
Okay, so it is wet if it's countywide.
If it's countywide, it would be considered wet.
And there's no stacking of the fees, so you can't the city can't put theirs on and then the county so no stacking. Do we know? And I find this interesting. A county without a city with a population of less than 20,000. What a description.
Statutory words, sorry.
Yeah, I know. But actually, I represent a county that doesn't have a city. It's not incorporated. It's kind of hard to believe, but that's true. But do we know what this generates, or is there some type of reporting as to what is generated by these local taxes and regulatory licensing fees?
The Department of Local Government has what we call UFERS, but
Uniform Financial Reporting Systems.
But that data is not consistent, and our economists, I hate to throw them under the bus here, but they have recently told me they don't rely on that anymore.
And we don't have that data either, sir.
It's interesting, though. Right. Is there any way that we could collect it?
Yeah, so the counties might want to come up here. So you want to come up here?
John Brent, County Judge in Henry County.
Talk into here, please. Say your name again.
John Brent, County Judge in Henry County. And just to address your last question about the fees, I actually came up here interested in the barrel tax, but we were a county that went wet not too long ago, voted to do so. So those fees that you're talking about that are associated with retail sales, by the drink sales, tourism, hospitality, those type of things, actually, according to statute, those fees that we collect are supposed to only be used for running the administration of the program. So possibly if you take a deeper dive into this, maybe that language could be changed.
I understand
as well.
that you're just kind of like the transient room tax or the restaurant tax. Correct. It has a statutory purpose for which you are not to deviate.
Correct.
But my question is how much does that generate?
I can tell you for our county, it generates about $100,000 a year. We're in a county of about 16,000 people, just a couple of 2 or 3 restaurants, and it's mainly convenience stores selling beer. And we have one city that is excluded, and they have their own ABC officer and collect their own taxes on that. And it's a small city.
Thanks, Chad.
That helps.
Great. Thank you for the information. So I want to just add one final thought, and we'll get out of here for this Friday. You know, this is I'm from Bardstown. We're the bourbon capital of the world, trademark, right? And what's important to remember is a lot of our distilleries right now are doing great. I mean, we're having record profits, we're having record years, we're having record production. Everything seems to be going well. But this barrel tax, what I'm referring to. Keep in perspective the barrier to entry this is causing for new distilleries. Right now, in my law job, I've got clients that want to open new distilleries. You're looking at a 2-year window to build, but you got to lay down 20, 30 million bucks. Then you start producing your distillate, and you're not going to have a product you can sell for another 4 years. So you're about 6 years in on investment. But during that time, the state of Kentucky starts to tax you on a product you cannot sell. And that's this barrel tax. And what that's doing is, if you're looking at where am I going to go build my new distillery, well, I could go to Kentucky, that would be great. Or I could also go to any other jurisdiction on planet Earth. We are the only one that taxes it in this product at this place. And I just want to point out that Kentucky used to have 43% of all distilling jobs. We now have 30. Kentucky has now fallen to the 12th in number of distilleries in the nation, and we're falling. And Jennifer, if you could go to the next slide. And this is some crap I got on Instagram. This popped up on my Instagram 2 days ago. The state of bourbon is changing. Texas is where you want to be. So Texas is actively advertising to new places, come down here. I'm not on Facebook, but Eric Gregory shared with me the other one. Here's West Virginia. There are many ingredients that it takes to have a great bourbon, but Kentucky's not one of them. Guys, this industry is so important for our tourism. And for my little town in Bardstown, for my county, I mean, I know we make a lot of money on that barrel tax, and that's great. But if we don't do something about it, we will lose all of this. So we've really got to get creative, work together. We want to hold the counties and local governments harmless, but we've got to figure out a way to get rid of this barrier to entry. And I'll shut up. T. Huff, you had something you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the first 2 years, the bourbon is not considered bourbon, so it's not taxed for the first 2 years and a day. We've mentioned a lot of today about how we tax it all along. Really, it's after 2 years and a day. So
right. All right. Anybody got anything else? Nope. Jennifer Decker.
I think what you just described would be, with your slides, seems like we're the Napa Valley of bourbon, and then these other states are trying to be the Sonoma, and I don't think we want that
at all.
Kentucky. Thank you.
All right. Next meeting is July 22nd. President Stivers will chair. Do I need a technical motion to adjourn?
Let's.
Oh, thank you. Hold on. I do have one other thing before that meeting. Guys, we passed out today, as a part of the materials, the county information that broke down by all the taxing districts. I am looking to everybody out there, whether you're from the bourbon industry or one of our county partners or a school district, if you're out there listening. I want us to come to some numbers we agree on. So look at those. Come back to the next meeting, July 22nd, and tell me, yes, I agree. We've got the magnitude right here. No, I don't agree. And here's where you're wrong. And then show me what you think the numbers are. One of the most frustrating things in Frankfurt is this goalpost moving garbage. I'm not interested in that. I want to know, do we all agree on what the magnitude is? We may be off a little bit here and there, given the fact that it's all estimates until taxing day, if you will. But that's sort of my charge to everyone. When we come back, I want us to have agreed. So if you've got different numbers, maybe get them to our staff so that we have all that before the next meeting. President Stivers.
That's all I was going to add.
All right. Then we're adjourned.